The Buffalo Bills are preparing for a massive AFC showdown versus the Cincinnati Bengals this Sunday at Highmark Stadium, as the Bengals have been resurrected now that Joe Burrow is back in the lineup to the point where they are only 2 games behind the Steelers and the Ravens for the AFC North Division lead, as the Steelers and the Ravens are both 6-6, the Bengals are 4-8. Meanwhile, the Bills are 8-4, and they have a 91% chance of making the playoffs. But nonetheless, this is still huge for both teams. But before we zoom in and take a look at this Bills-Bengals matchup, I want to get a vibe check right now because I feel like Sunday's game against the Steelers was a microcosm of what we've seen the whole season from this Bills team. Just a roller coaster of emotions, the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of the game, to the point where I think you could make a case that we really didn't learn much about this team, at least from an offensive point of view. The defense, got to give them credit, though, because that was one of, if not their best games of the season, as they held the Steelers to just 166 total yards, and Joey Bosa's strip sack early in the third quarter was really the turning point of the game, and Christian Benford was the one who recovered that fumble, scored the touchdown, and then picked off Mason Rudolph just 10 seconds later. And just 2 quick updates on that. Christian Benford has just been named AFC Defensive Player of the Week, and Sean McDermott did say that Joey Bosa is week to week with the hamstring injury. So I really liked what I saw from the Bills defense, but going back to the offense now, and this is what I mean about not learning much, because we know that the Bills have shifted their identity to being able to win up front and be a dominant rushing attack. The Bills are number 1 in the NFL, and they proved that on Sunday as they ran for 249 yards and really took advantage of that Steelers' porous defense. And that was the most rushing yards that the Steelers have given up since 1975. So we know that they like to go on these long, sustaining drives. The Bills had the ball for 42 minutes. The Steelers only had it for 18. James Cook was phenomenal. Ray Davis looked really well. Ty Johnson had a great game. Josh did his thing on the ground. But at the expense of their running game, their passing game looked lackluster once again and left a lot to be desired. Once again, they just looked out of sync, had no rhythm, to the point where they just had 3 points at the half, and it was a really sloppy first half. Now, it's important to understand the game script because when the Bills are averaging almost 5 yards per rush and can pick up 5, 10, 15 chunks of yards at a time on the ground, you really don't need the passing game to be on its A game, especially when you consider the win factor as well. But I remember saying at halftime that Joe Brady was coaching not to lose rather than coaching to win, because the Bills had 26 rushes compared to 12 passing attempts, and there was just nothing clicking on offense. So I wanted to see them open it up down the field a little bit more using Josh Allen's arm. And I said, this really isn't a winning recipe here. I want to see my MVP quarterback take the game into his own hands. But clearly Brady proved me to be wrong, because I guess I underestimated how bad the Steelers' run defense was, and that was the winning recipe for Sunday's game. But I think there is something to be said for the winning recipe the rest of the season, because not every team is Pittsburgh. Not every run defense that the Bills face from here on out is going to be that porous. I mean, take a look at their next few opponents. So Cincinnati, they're 31st against a run. So who knows, maybe James Cook will run for 250 by himself. But then you have New England, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. The Patriots have already proved that they can slow down your rushing attack. Cleveland has a top 10 run defense, and Myles Garrett is playing out of his mind this season. And Philadelphia is always very stout up front. So at some point, you're going to have to show that you can consistently win with the passing game. And one other note is that the Bills wide receivers only had 5 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. So great for Keon Coleman to catch that 4th down touchdown. And again, taking this all into account here, the Bills use their running backs and their tight ends, but is that a winning recipe to get them to February? And that's why I wanted to turn this to the fans and get this vibe check. So let's take a look and see where the confidence level is right now amongst Bills Mafia. So yesterday I asked the fans, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your level of confidence in the Bills for the rest of the season? 10 is the highest. You think this team has everything that it takes and they're going all the way this year. 1 is the lowest. The window is closed. You don't even think the Bills will make the playoffs, and they need to fire Bean and McDermott. So let's see what people had to say. So the first comment was from James, and he said just a 4. Due to a combination of poor talent and lack of scheme evolution, the Bills' passing offense has really struggled in obvious passing situations. Since week 4, they ranked 27th in EPA per play on 3rd and 6 to go. Greg said 7.5. I would go 6.5, but we have a wild card with Josh Allen. Also, the AFC seems weaker, so we can easily represent. However, everything is based upon health and getting 3 wide receivers who can contribute. Carl said, I'd say about a 6.5 after a win against a bad Steelers team. These are teams Buffalo should beat. If healthy and clicking on all cylinders, I think Buffalo can beat any team. I am still very hesitant to say this is a year based on the team's bipolar tendencies. If they were to win the next 3, I'd be on board. Kohole says, 4. I see a poorly constructed team with the top quarterback and elite running back. Probably 11 and 6. Be lucky to advance past the first round. Bean is proven incapable of drafting or signing top-tier talent. Too many busts. McDermott is competent, but a weak game day coach. OC/DC not good enough. Change is needed. And Bills are electric says 6. The Texans exposed a bunch of the Bills' weaknesses. The most glaring is the inability to pass the ball more than 10 yards down the field. That is not getting fixed in the next 4 to 5 games. And injuries keep cropping up, which doesn't help. Continuing on here, Mike says that in a vacuum it's a 6 or a 7, but when I consider the AFC landscape, I see an 8 or a 9 because I like their chances against any potential opponent in the playoffs. Crypto says 8 because you usually get an A game from Allen in the playoffs, and his A game is better than anyone else's A game, and without the Chiefs being able to move the ball at will on the defense like nobody else seems to do, I like our chances against anyone else. Brad was the highest one I got here, so he said, as of now, I'm giving it a 10. I think they will turn it on at this time of the year. Easy for me to say coming off a dominant win, though. And just a couple more here. SKD says 4 for the remainder of the season. Immediately goes up to a 6 if the last 2 draft classes show anything for the rest of the season. 8 if Brandon Bean makes a significant trade or hits on the 2026 draft. Hunter says no home playoff games at the Ralph means you're screwed. Jake says no greater than a 3 at any point this year. Lowest has been an absolute 0. An average is probably a 1, maybe 1.2. And then Pat rounds us off with an 8. So I got about a dozen responses, and I appreciate everyone who did take the time to respond. And I did the math, and it averaged out to about a 6. And that's pretty on par for what I was thinking that the fan base is at right now. I know it's a smaller sample size, but I figured everyone is probably around that 6, 7 to 8 range. And if I were to give my answer, I would say that I'm probably around a healthy 7 right now, because I agree with what a lot of the comments said. I don't really like the way that Bean constructed this roster from the start, and I think that the passing game is an issue and could creep up once again later this season. But just get in the playoffs and anything can happen, because as we'll take a look at the AFC playoff picture here in a few minutes, Josh Allen might be the most experienced quarterback in the playoffs this year, at least on the AFC side of things. And another reason why I think that we can have just a little bit more confidence in this team is that the Bills have a lot of unsung heroes who are contributing as of late and doing a lot of the dirty work that goes unnoticed. So I would like to highlight 5 players who I think need to be recognized. And the first 2 are offensive tackles Alec Anderson and Ryan Vandemark, because these 2 guys started in a pinch for the injured Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown. And this was Anderson's first start at tackle since his college days, because if you remember, he was coming in as that 6th offensive lineman for the Bills' jumbo packages last year. And aside from 2 false start penalties, those guys were great, and they helped pave the way for that record-setting performance on the ground. 249 yards. Like I said, that was the most that the Steelers have given up since 1975. Josh Allen was sacked 0 times, and I barely heard TJ Watt's name as he finished with just 4 tackles. 0 of them were solo tackles. He had 0 tackles for loss, 0 sacks, and 0 QB hits. The next guy that I want to talk about is wide receiver Tyrell Shavers, because I tweeted at halftime that I didn't understand why Shavers did not have one single target in the first half against the Steelers and in the whole game against the Texans, because I said he was a week and a half removed from a career best game against the Buccaneers, 4 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown, and then the Bills don't even look his way. But I want to highlight him here because, as a lot of people mentioned on Twitter, he's been blocking his butt off, and he had the most snaps out of any wide receiver for the Bills. He had 45 snaps on offense, and he's done a very good job of also helping pave the way for the Bills' rushing attack. Number 4, Tre'Davious White. And as I said with this tweet, I feel like we haven't talked enough about how much better Trey White has been playing ever since a bye. So if we take a look at his stats from weeks 3 through 6, he played 239 snaps, he was targeted 16 times and allowed 13 receptions for a reception percentage allowed of 81.3%. He gave up 142 yards, a touchdown, and if you take the average of his passer rating allowed for those 4 weeks, it was 105.2. So then if you take a look at weeks 8 through 13, 221 snaps, and as I noted there, Maxwell Harrison returned week 8, so it's important to note that the volume per game per week hasn't been as high, but still when you stretch it out, it's pretty similar. So within those 221 snaps, he's been targeted 12 times, and he's only allowed 2 receptions for 20 yards and 0 touchdowns, and his passer rating allowed average is just a 40.4. So it is great to see Trey White balling once again. And last but not least, linebacker Shaq Thompson, because the defense has been completely different when Shaq is in the lineup. They just have this certain nastiness and aggressiveness to them, to the point where the Bills had a very, very good run defense output on Sunday afternoon. And as I tweeted here, so he's been quite the revelation for the Bills defense this season. Just a cheap contract. You know, we can make fun of Brandon Beane all we want for the Carolina connection and how he always goes after ex-Panthers, but this is one of those that is really paying dividends. So here are Buffalo's run defense stats when Thompson plays for Terrell Bernard. So Bernard got injured right before halftime of that Falcons game, and in that second half, after getting carved up in that first half from Bijan Robinson, the Bills only allowed 10 rushes for 40 yards and 0 touchdowns, and most importantly, just 3 points were allowed. We go to the Carolina game because Bernard did miss following the bye. He missed that first week coming off the bye against the Panthers, and the Bills gave up 28 rushes for 114 yards and 1 touchdown, but the Bills won 40-9. So again, they only allowed 9 points. Second half of the Houston game, 9 rushes, 20 yards, 0 touchdowns, 3 points allowed. The Steelers game, 18 rushes, 58 yards, 1 touchdown, 7 points allowed. So as I said here, Buffalo's defense has only allowed 22 points in essentially 3 games, so that's 12 quarters worth, when Thompson plays for Bernard, as well as a 3.6 yards per carry average. Conversely, Buffalo is allowing 5.5 yards per carry with Bernard on the field. Shaq Thompson cannot leave the field again this season. So I don't know if the Bills are going to want to straight up bench Terrell Bernard when he gets healthy, because let's face it, he is their defensive captain. He wears a green dot. He just got paid. They signed him to that big extension. But at the end of the day, it comes down to results. And Shaq Thompson is clearly the better linebacker right now. So maybe they're going to give some more 4-3 looks, and maybe Taron Johnson is the odd one out. Or maybe they could just platoon him and play Shaq Thompson on running downs and Bernard on passing downs. But either way, Shaq Thompson needs to be on the Buffalo Bills defense for the rest of the season. Okay, now finishing up here, I want to take a look at the AFC playoff picture because, as I mentioned at the outset, the Bills have a 91% chance to make the playoffs now after they beat the Steelers on Sunday, and that's according to the New York Times. So as we take a look at the playoff picture now, so right now the Bills are the 7th seed, and as of right now, they would be going to Denver, who is the 2 seed. So literally the opposite of last year, as the Bills were the 2 seed, the Broncos were the 7th seed traveling to Buffalo. But unfortunately, the Patriots won again this week. Soft schedule, say what you want, but they are a good team. They're the 1 seed right now with an 11-2 record. It's sickening, but it is what it is. So the seeding right now goes, the Patriots are the 1 seed, Broncos are the 2 with the 10-2 record. The Jaguars are leading the AFC South right now with an 8-4 record. They're tied with the Colts, but they own the tiebreaker. I can't figure out the Jaguars. The Ravens are the 4 seed because they're leading the NFC North with the 6-6 record. And then it goes Chargers, Colts, Bills, all 8-4. So you can see how jumbled together this is. And we can take a look at some of these other teams here. Houston is right on the outside looking in, 7-5. Pittsburgh 6-6, although their best course of action, their best route is probably trying to win the AFC North. Kansas City is hanging on by a thread here. They are 6-6. Miami's still alive, 5-7. Cincinnati 4-8. Same thing as the Steelers. I mean, their best route is to win that division. And then we have the Jets, Browns, and I guess technically the Jets and Browns haven't been eliminated yet, but the Raiders and the Titans have. So there is a legitimate possibility that Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, and Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens are not going to be in the playoffs this year. So I guess the scenario there would be we would root for the Steelers to win the division so that Baltimore gets knocked out, Cincinnati's knocked out, and then hopefully Kansas City loses one or two more games and they're on the couch and not even in the playoffs. And that would be great because if the Bills could get the 5 seed and they travel to Pittsburgh, the 4 seed, sign me up 10 out of 10 times, 100 out of 100, whatever you want to say. I would love to go back to Pittsburgh for the wild card matchup. But if that really is the case where you don't have to go through Mahomes, Lamar, or Burrow, I know I just spent this video saying that I'm not exactly thrilled with the Bills roster construction. I think there's a lot to be desired, specifically with that passing game. But if it's Josh Allen against Daniel Jones, Bo Nix, Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, I love my chances with Josh Allen because he would be the most experienced quarterback on that side of the bracket. The Super Bowl is a different story. I mean, I think there are a lot of good teams over there. We can take a look at that real quick. I mean, the Bears are the 1 seed with the 9-3 record. The Rams are looking really good. I know they just had that loss to the Panthers, but they're 9-3. The 49ers, with all their injuries, are 9-4. The Packers, Eagles, Seahawks, even the Buccaneers. So, I mean, there are a lot of good teams in the NFC. But I'm just concerned about the AFC right now because it's not even a given that the Bills are going to make the playoffs. They need to keep winning and keep just going 1-0, as Joe Brady says. So that being said, thank you to everyone who contributed to the video this week. Whether you responded to my Twitter question yesterday or maybe you're dropping a comment right now and letting me know your thoughts and your levels of either confidence or concern as it relates to the Bills playoff picture. That being said, make sure you subscribe to my channel and like this video if you haven't already. The Bills have a big one on Sunday. We'll see how it goes, and go Bills.